So this is a title of my research program, so to speak, Differential Aging in Place, Person Environmental Fit Perspective. Because the simple fact that because you are here today, I assume that all of you must be sufficiently familiar with the general concept of aging in place. What I'm trying to do is to add differential part to this well-known phenomenon of aging in place and try to do that by drawing from the person environment fit theory or perspective. So let's get it started. Differential aging in place, because all my empirical studies are heavily drawing from any type of aging in place theoretical framework. So I will spend some time about theoretical perspective, and then I will dive into today's topic, which is about senior housing research examples. So this is my research program. The theme is differential aging in place, and I have two specific objectives in my research program. The first one is to identify subgroups of older peoples in person and environmental dimensions. So you can already see that my primary focus is one is about person, the second is about environment. And between the person and environment, I want to better identify a point of intervention where we can do what. And to do that, I have been drawing from the three groups of theories. The first one is ETA, Ecology of Theory of Aging, these two big names. And the second one is a person-centered perspective. This is also theory. But we all know that all the social work students and scholars are familiar with this one. But this one is slightly from the one you already know. I will talk about that. And the last one is a life course slash or hyphen lifespan development perspective. And by doing this, my ultimate and continuing objective is that I want to make a contribution to make this ETA theory a more refined, and then empirical methodological contribution I want to make by identifying the point of intervention. So this is my everything until now. So for the next few slides is the detailed explanation about what the theoretical background I was talking about. So the three big groups. The first group is ETA. So this two-person particular Lawton is the creator of this ETA. And this big theory has long been revised multiple times until he died. Those three times mainly. So this theory has composed of four components. The first is person part, environment part, and the fit between the two dimensions, and then adaptation. So to speak, this is the outcome. So the big idea about this theory is very simple, just like any big theories is typically talking about. So there are some characteristics about in-person dimension, some characteristics about in the environmental dimension, and there's supposed to be some optimal fit between these two dimensions, and depending on your fit, your behavior, your well-being will be determined. So this is what ETA is talking about. The second one is person-centered, or more popularly known as a profile perspective. My guess is many of you are familiar with cluster analysis, profile analysis, LTA, LPA. Such things are specifically referring to some methodological approaches. This one is not about that. This one is about theories. And the application about this theory is LCA, LTA, cluster, and profile analysis. And the creator of this perspective is largely European scholars, this big name, Bolt. And this is my advisor in Michigan, and many European scholars. The big idea about this theory is emphasizes totality or interconnectedness of individual or environmental, whatever characteristics of of dimensions you are looking at. So for example, if we are talking about person dimension, if we are talking about health limitations, you should be looking at totality or interconnectedness of health. So for example, you really shouldn't be just talking about physical health, number of chronic diseases. Rather than doing that, you should look at totality, everything, physical health, mental health, cognitive health, everything. So, and that kind of logic applies to environment as well. Uh, And the last one is life course and lifespan development perspective. A short explanation is needed here because life course perspective is like a paradigm, but the one that I am familiar with and the one that I am mainly drawing from is a sociological aspect, sociological application of life course. And this lifespan is a developmental psychology theory. And about 20 years or so, or more than that, sociological life course people and psychological lifespan people got together, and these are the group of people, and have begun to argue that we have been each talking about essentially the same thing with a slightly different emphasis. We need to work together. And from that point, this big group of theorists have been working together, and there's some group of people have their perspective just like this, life courses slash lifespan development perspective. And this is the world that I was trained when I was working in Michigan, trained as a doctoral student. So this is my third component of my theoretical background. So across almost all my empirical studies, what I've been trying to do is that I am trying to combine the three big groups of theories and then come up with my own research questions and choose the most relevant and prime analytical approach to answer my specific questions. So I will spend 2 more slides to continue explanation of my big theoretical background before I will get into one of my senior housing examples. So this is another representation of the previous one, the previous slide. So in terms of environment, I'm talking about this. The combined aspect of a physical environment and social environment. So long ago, the ETA was primarily focused on physical environment, like physical characteristics of a housing, physical characteristics of neighborhood, like that. And then soon after that, that theory has later was criticized. The sole focus of physical, what about social environment? So in that way, the theory has been expanded, revised. But that was not the end of it. Another group came in and keep criticizing. What about the structural aspect, functional aspect, evaluate aspect, all those different aspects of functions in the environment. So in addition to this combined aspect, another layer, and then SES, gender, and race, you'd be thinking that this is the typical social stratification or typical sociological construct. But depending on how you argue it, this could be the macro layer of the living environment. And you can continue go up and up and up until history, culture, and cohort. So it's important to note that in the pathway to the expansion of this originally very narrow focused ETA has been continued to be expanded to include all those big sociological constructs. So I'm talking about this big idea about living environment. And then looking at the person. And like I told you about minutes ago, between this complex multi-layered living environment and person, there is a fit between the two. And from the fit, the human agency or the efficacy will be determined. Depending on which theory you are drawing from, efficacy is a kind of it's a terminology that is most often used in developmental psychology or psychology in general. But the same construct is a human agency in sociological life course perspective. Same thing. And then from these complex relations, your ultimate outcome will be determined. And whenever you are looking at this complex association, you should be doing longitudinally the time dimension. So this time dimension is the core idea of life course and lifespan perspective. So majority of my empirical studies, I am doing longitudinal studies. And I have to add that majority of my studies, environmental studies, I'm using nationally representative longitudinal studies, mainly because of this concept, mainly because of this conceptual framework I am drawing from. Please look at this bottom line. This is the thing that I am talking about today. So whenever I'm looking at this complex association, my ultimate focus has always been to what extent the association, the above, differs by the living place, the where you live. Are you living in the traditional private home? Or are you living in the congregate setting, like a planned living facilities, like senior housings, all different type of senior housings, independent living facilities, assisted living, nursing homes. So although I am doing this some comparison, but my own interest is more like in this part, the planned living facilities. And this is another visual representation of my world. And so here, this part, the bottom part is environment, the upper part is a person. You see the same thing, right? Physical, social, group environment, housing, and then go one more level up, community, neighborhood, one more level up, all the way to the culture, institution, society, history, and this. So whatever level you are staying on, you should be looking at the structure part, function part, quality part, and then person. And when it comes to person part, it also gets very, very complicated. You can focus on your the totality, interconnectedness of all those different aspects of health. If your research question is everything about health, or you can focus on your socio-economic status. If we are drawing from life course, you would be naturally, particularly very, very interested in this type of thing. What was your SES when you're adulthood? What was your SES when you're growing up? And this is gender and race. These attributes in the life course world is considered as ascribed factors. So there's a reason that I highlighted number 2 and number 4, because the paper I am presenting today is about this. So I'm focusing on housing environment in this huge world of living environment, and in this complex person dimension, I'm focusing on this. So between this person dimension, environment dimension, where's the fit? And for the current paper I will be talking about today, I skip over this human agency part and then go directly to my outcome. Behavioral effect adaptation, it can be anything. For the paper today, my outcome is cognitive impairment. And then do these examinations longitudinally. So this is my conceptual framework that suggests where I'm going in my empirical applications. So if you look at this pair of pictures, with this set of pictures, what I'm trying to show you is that the aging in place, the process and outcome of aging in place would be very, very different, would be differential depending on where you live. The first picture is a typical picture I took many, many years ago in Michigan. It's a private, conventional housing for low-income families, a very typical picture. And this is a subsidized housing for low-income seniors, publicly subsidized. And the last two set of picture is my dream world. So this last two set of pictures, two pictures is essentially same group of people living in the second picture, but it's a subsidized plus supportive housing for low-income seniors. The stark difference between this housing and the upper two housings is there is a certain set of services being either directly provided or indirectly coordinated with a variety of delivery mechanisms. So when I was studying my doctoral program in Korea, we didn't have any kind of a housing models or even concept like this. So in my first year when I was a student, I had a chance to do some volunteering work in this living environment. Then I still remember that I was so shocked that the most vulnerable poor older people were able to live in this kind of senior housings, and this senior housing model even do exist. So I remember back then I asked the service coordinators working in this senior housing environment. I asking them that whether I can take a lot of pictures of many aspects of this housing so that I can send my pictures to my government colleagues. I used to work with the Korean government and still work with them so that they can see my pictures and do something. So this is the beginning point of my developing my research program. Why don't I stop here because I will make a transition if I do have any questions so far. Has anybody raised their hand or chat?
No question. No. So go ahead.
Okay. So please. Where I am coming from. So this is my research agenda, my research program. And next few slides that I will show you is the direct empirical application of my conceptual framework. So for example, this paper is a heterogeneity of health and environment profiles of older adults living alone. So most of my papers, my sample is very focused on those who live alone. I will tell you why I am particularly interested in this subgroup of people. I always am very interested in subgroup of something. So my sample for my first paper, chat. Natalie, we have a question. Can you enlarge your screen, minimize the video of yourself? For me, I see my PPT only.
Yeah, it looks fine, Sojung. Can you just maybe make it a little bigger, zoom in a little bit more on it?
Did you see that suggestion from Peter, son? Swap shared screen.
How about now? Does that make any difference? I cannot even check the chat.
Sure that it has made it.
Yeah. Go ahead, continue on.
Yeah, okay. Where was I? Yeah, I am interested in identifying, focusing a subgroup of something. So for in terms of person dimension, and this whole sample starting from those who are living alone. But in terms of person, I am identifying subgroup of health limitations and physical and social. So for each box, I typically look at multiple items and do clustering analysis and identify some cluster of physical environment, cluster of social environment, different cluster of health limitation subgroups. And this arrow conceptually represent the person environment fit. So this is a direct application of my conceptual framework. So just one example. Another example, essentially same approach, but you can see that I do some mediation modeling because of agency. Human agency or efficacy or control, self-control is all same construct. Depending on which data, which construct operationalization you can use. So for this environment, the physical, social environment, and health profile, exactly same set of construct, but then mediation and a variety of outcome and longitudinal. So series of my empirical papers, I am using cross-sectional, longitudinal, all different data, but the underlying idea is about the same. And this is a survival, so that's longitudinal survival analysis. But from this paper, you can see that I start to bring in senior housing construct or variable. So for the first couple of years, I first wanted to show that my conceptual framework can be empirically tested. Then from third year or so, I started to directly testing the role of senior housing because this is my dream part. So from the paper 3, I begin to use a variable of senior housing using whatever data that I had back then. So, but the basic idea about identifying PE fit is the same. Another type of senior housing is a nursing home admission. For this paper, it is outcome itself. This is not about senior housing, but it's a homebound, poor, but it's another aspect of service environment. So many of my papers of living environment, I typically divide social environment, physical environment, and service environment. This particular paper, particular data has a series of a nice set of questions about service environment. So I want you to make the use of it. So this paper is about that. And this paper is very explicitly is something about senior housing. And then SES, it's all longitudinal. I think this paper 6 is a precursor of the current paper I'm talking about today. And then another senior housing paper, cumulative and differential aging in place. Cumulative is a core idea of sociological brand of life course. So for this paper, what I wanted to achieve is to combine the core theoretical idea of life course and my own idea, differential and aging in place, and focus on economic vulnerability and the role of senior housing and rehospitalization. So paper 6 and paper 7 set a very nice tone for the paper, the later paper. And this is the paper we'll be talking about today. The main reason I decided to share with you this paper is because it's the last in the series of my senior housing paper. So I thought it makes sense because I try to put in every small effort that I have been trying to make for the last few years into this one paper so that I can test many different things in one single paper. So this 3 lines itself is a title, the actual title of this paper, Person Environment Fit Approach to Trajectories of Cognitive Function among older adults who live alone. So I'm still talking about older adults who live alone, still talking about trajectory, which is longitudinal, still talking about PE fit, an intersection of life course SES disadvantage and senior housing. So life course SES disadvantage is the core idea of sociological life course. So the basic thing stays same. This interaction represents the conceptual idea about PE fit. So the research question is, to what extent life course disadvantage, critical period, SES mobility, cumulative SES disadvantage, I will get into this in detail in a second, associated with the changes in cognitive function over time. So the first question is everything about this life course SES. The second question is to assess the extent to which senior housing residents moderate the effect of life course SES disadvantage on cognitive function over time. I always argue and tell people whenever I get a chance, please try to avoid use the effect. I shouldn't have done that myself here because this is not causal in design. This is still associational. A little bit better design because it's longitudinal, but it's not effect. So maybe I should change it to influence of life course SES. So this is my two simple, big research question. Why am I interested in older adults who live alone? Because of this, in the United States, more than 12 million people over age, 30% of the entire populations currently live alone in their community. My own personal observation is when I was first got interested in this subgroup of older people like 10 years ago, I didn't feel like many people got interested in as much as I was. But I think the interest in this subgroup is fast increasing. There's a specialized special issues of a few journals that just focus on this living alone people. And this phenomenon is not just in the US, it's also spreading in many countries. And not entire older people are vulnerable, of course. The third bullet point, but a growing body of research has focused on subset of at-risk older adults who live alone with little or no support system. So naturally for me, I am not generally interested in everybody who live alone, but again, the subgroup of generally already vulnerable group of people who are living alone. So for whatever data I have, I tend to sub-select those who live alone and then focus who are the subgroup of these living alone people in terms of SES, in terms of environment. So this is my rationale. And then this is my ambition. I want to combine life course perspective and environment perspective when examining cognitive functions. So life course research has suggested that later year cognitive functional changes may originate from early life adversities, that there are many common risk factors. Life course research, not all of them, it depends on which strand of your life course research you are drawing from. But one big line of research, life course research, is everything about early life adversities. They argue that almost every outcomes you can trace back from your early life. So that's simply put, that's the idea of life course idea. And then environmental research on aging emphasized the important role of living environmental context, the multi layers that I showed you before in achieving healthy aging. But my observations for the last multiple decades, this area of research and this area of research has been going on their own way, not particularly systematically, theoretically, conceptually combined. So, but it becomes so natural for me that these two conceptual frameworks should be combined. So no known study. When I was working on this paper, it's already a few years ago. No known study investigated the unique experiences of older people who live alone, especially the extent of more vulnerable subgroup of heterogeneity in the life context and living environment. And of course, no known study using the combined aspect of these two theories. So there lies my ambition. I want to share with you what I tried to do and why I did that. So this is a very high level summary of what I did for this paper. So this is big picture, a snapshot of life course world, life course mechanisms. So one world, critical period. Another world is accumulation of risk models. Another world is social mobility. Another world is a pathway. Depending on which summary articles, review type of articles you are reading regarding life course world, it could be a couple of more, and that authors could be using a slight different way of organizations. But if you are talking about these four big worlds, it's safe to say that you cover almost all of them. And each one of them is originated in a different discipline, like public health, psychology, sociology, in some cases, combination of the two. So it took me quite a while to wrap my head around of this big confusing world and get this summary. But there are many summary type of articles to get understand of this huge framework. So the critical period is, the core idea is that there is a biological imprinting that suggested that everything about early life SES has a long-lasting and potentially irreversible effect on biological systems. So if something happens in your childhood, that effect really lasts until you die. It's a very deterministic, very powerful, very simple idea, but there is an unbelievably large body of research just to focus on this critical period. And then second is accumulation of risk model. Note that this exact name of this model varies a lot. It's slightly different depending on which type of articles you get to read. But the basic idea is that your risk is accumulating over time. And then social mobility is emphasizing about something can change still in terms of social mobility. So for example, the burden of all the disadvantage can be counterbalanced. So this is a big idea in this group, by improved conditions in adulthood. So even if something happened, very bad happens multiple times during your childhood, if there is a counterbalancing factors, experiences that happened later while you're growing up, that adverse effect can be mitigated or even reverse the negative impact of early hardships. So naturally for me or many other social worker researchers, I think and I thought that instead of critical period, or even accumulation of risk models, this idea of social mobility sounds attractive because we are talking about something that can be mitigated, something that can be reversed. This came from sociology life course models, and pathway. This is very psychological because typically psychological. Psychology and psychological empirical researchers are so heavily focused on mechanism, all the complex mediation modelings, the pathway. So obviously this is about their world. They emphasize that the effect of earlier exposures are mediated by many multiple exposures. So if you happen to read some of their pathway papers, it's unbelievably complex with so many mediators. So we are talking about four big worlds in a simpler way of summarization of life course mechanism. What I wanted to do is that what can I do and how should I do that if I want to reflect all of these distinct life course mechanism into one empirical examination of life course effect, because I was not quite satisfied with so different and separate way of they're going their own way. So we are talking about 1, 2, 3, 4 different groups. So critical period people just do critical period forever. Pathway people just talking about pathway forever. But so I want to get a big picture with my own empirical examination as it relates to the potentially positive role of living in senior housing. I have done many papers about senior housings for the few years, and I thought it's about time for me to move forward with comprehensive, conceptually, theoretically guided. So I was beginning from this slide and then do something. This is my data. As I told you, this is a few years ago already, health retirement study. This is my dissertation data. I'm still using this whenever I use some, my studies using US data for aging. I think this is the best data for me as it related to aging. And right now, this data is available up to until 2016. But when I was working on this paper, 2014 was already available, but for my dependent variable, which is about cognitive function, this was the last data that was available. So this is my sample focused on individuals who live alone, no proxy, community dwelling, age 65 at baseline. And I excluded those who changed their main residence. So I followed for 10 years for same group of people to do a neat, clean way of longitudinal analysis. And this is attrition. For typical trajectory model, what I always do, I include those who died, those who are treated for non-death reasons to get a better estimations. So although I have lost these people, this information itself is put back in my regression models. So this is what I did. So you can see the development idea here, life stage, the conventional life stage, childhood, adulthood, old age. And then in order for me to construct SES for each developmental life stage, I took the first step here and then second step. So this is the first step, all about SES disadvantage. So for example, if you're looking at childhood, parent education variable, parental occupation variable, financial status in childhood, all binary, and the final disadvantage indicators, still binary, median split of the summary score. It might look very simple, but it is not actually a simple idea. Almost, I wouldn't say 100%, but the vast majority of the critical period people are actually have been using this type of operationalization depending on the availability of the specific set of variables. So this is strictly following from the previous literatures, and same with adulthood. So for each developmental stage, use all the available variables about SES disadvantages, and then I construct the final disadvantage indicators, 3. A unique thing about old age SES, I based on the 185% of the federal poverty level that correspond roughly to the national level of 80% of area median income, because my setting is about senior housing. So this is a step 1. Step 2 is 8 cumulative disadvantage patterns. So I went through step 1 to arrive at this cumulative construct. So four areas. So from all the way from the no disadvantage group to the most disadvantaged group. So for example, if you didn't have childhood SES disadvantage, 0 here, 0 here, 0 here, so simply put entire your life, you never had no SES disadvantage. Here, number 8, you are really miserable. And critical period and mobility. So if you look at closely, then you can see that I was trying to follow the conceptual idea about the critical period and the social mobility. So for example, your mobility was like upward, was going better or going worse, or some kind of very unstable. Unstable is also not surprisingly may suggest that your life trajectory pattern was kind of unstable. So this is my final 8 cumulative disadvantages pattern variables. And this is my senior housing, the environment, the big one. HLS has only one single, very crude senior housing variables. It asks this: is your house or apartment part of a retirement community, senior citizens housing, or some type of housing that offers services for older adults or someone with a disability? It doesn't include nursing home. It includes independent living facilities, assisted living. It could be many other things, but this is the only variable that is available in HLS. And other than HLS, there's almost no other data except one special edition of that national data. Any other national data doesn't even have a variable like this. So I thought this is my best bet. So it's a binary. And this is my outcome. I think you are all aging scholars or practitioners or students, so I think all of you might be familiar with this very, very heavily utilized popular cognitive function variable, 0 to 35. Higher scores indicate higher cognitive functions. So this is my variable, and my method is multi-level growth modelings. My sample is a mean time follow-up is 6.2 years. So typically my sample participated in a little bit more than 6 years. In terms of result, I won't go into huge details, but this is the descriptive informations, and this yellow highlighted part is the core finding. So the hierarchical model 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trajectory models. Model 5 is my final models, and PE fit is interaction between my life course SES and living in senior housings. And I have 2 significant findings, but in terms of findings, visual representation makes far better. So look at this. So everybody, of course, over time, their cognitive functions declines a little bit over time. That's not surprising at all. We all know that. But if you're living in senior housing, the slope of decline is not as bad as when you live in home. So if we are talking about same subgroup of people, childhood and old age, childhood and old is an unstable group of people. But if you live in senior housing, this line is better. So the rate of decline in cognitive housing is slow compared to this group. And this all 3 life stage disadvantages, miserable group of people, of course, it's the worst. But even for this worst group of people, if you live in senior housing, they are doing far better. So this is the finding that I always wanted to find. I somehow knew from all those endless anecdotal evidences, but there's not much, almost little or no empirical studies that use national data, longitudinal one, that just focused on this senior housing. In addition to this life course SES, I'm almost sure until today this paper is the only one. And then subsequently this paper is published is in one of the very, very top journals. So I think in terms of senior housing, I begin to show a very initial evidence of a positive influence of living in senior housing. I do have some limitations. I will get to that if some of you have some questions. I want to show this one very quickly. So the paper I overviewed together and reviewed one paper is the secondary data, but this 4 box represents my current primary data project, because as you can see, the senior housing variable that I was able to use from HLS is so crude. I was never happy. So what I did for the last almost 4 years already, that I developed a very rich set of questions about senior housing based on all the literature review, and I began my own primary data. So this is a senior housing in St. Louis. The yellow dot represents the completed surveys. And this one is in New Hampshire. My Michigan colleagues use my own survey and replicate my own project there. And this is Chicago. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dots only, but we were really ambitious at the beginning, but because of the virus, it had to stop in the middle of doing this. So of course, very frustrated, but there's no other way. So it stopped cold. But this is Chicago, and for this, my focus is all the immigrants in Chicago, because we are talking about large mega city, and it has a very different characteristics. It has a whole building just about Korean immigrants, another whole building just about Chinese, Vietnamese from Latin America. So it's a very immigrant context, very rich in that context. So my angle in Chicago was about that. And then this is Korea. You don't see any red dots here because it's every housings in one rural area. So for this, my Korean project, my explicit focus is about rural housing models. It's completed already last year, and publications already came out. My ending slide is about this Korean because I feel very special about this project. So research in Seoul, Korea, housing models for urban and rural. At the top of my talk today, I told you guys that in my first year as a doctor student in Michigan, when I was volunteering in supportive senior housing, I was really shocked because no such models do exist. If you look at this urban model, this is like a 3 years old, brand new urban senior housing model. And this is a social environment, physical environment. This is rural, very, very rural. It has a longer history than urban model and different. So let me